All right, hello and welcome to Gold Coast School Construction. My name is Chris Clausing, a program director with Gold Coast, and I'm really excited to have with us today Doug Harvey, our #1 primo instructor for our building inspector and Division I programs. So Doug, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you.
It's super excited. I've literally been dying to do this interview for months and months and months. So we're going to hold you for as long as we can here. But Doug is actually at one of our Lantana campuses right now. So we're live streaming from the actual classroom. So welcome from Lantana. And so I just wanted to kind of get into a little bit of your background. I mean, you have such a wide breadth of knowledge in the building safety industry, building inspection and being a building official. Kind of how did you get into the industry? Kind of what has your path been to get to this point? It's so interesting. You have such an interesting career.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity to tell you about this. It is interesting, and I'll be honest, I've had a lot of opportunities over the course of my career. I came out of the field. I've been an electrician, I've been a contractor, and I was actually out on a job as a contractor one day when one of the inspectors came. He was inspecting my job, and he looked at me and said, "You ever thought about being an inspector?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "Well, I've got an opening. You ought to apply for it."
Oh, that's awesome.
And that changed everything. I became an inspector, and then I became a plan reviewer. I'm one of those people that I'm just never satisfied with why things are just done that way. I always want to know why. I like to dig into things and find out why. And I've studied a lot of the industry. I am certified in building, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing, licensed by the state of Florida, and am very proud of the certifications. So I became an inspector, became a plans examiner, and then advanced to doing more and studied, became a building official. And ever since that day, I keep asking myself, why did I want to be the building official? It is a very, very interesting field.
Yes.
Every day is an adventure, and you learn very quickly. If you didn't know before, you learn very quickly how to multitask and how to go ahead and try and balance things, which is what I always tried to do as an inspector or as a plans examiner. You have to put yourself into the shoes of your client, your customer, whether it's the contractor, the architect, the owner. And owners don't understand what we do. Part of the issue with building departments is that building departments get held responsible for everything that holds up a job. It could be a zoning issue where somebody didn't pay attention to setbacks. Has nothing to do with the building code.
Right.
But the building department won't issue my permit. And you have to be able to respond to those things. And whether it's an inspector, a plans examiner, or a building official, you have to be able to explain to people that there are other criteria beyond the building code, and that the building code is put in place as a minimum standard.
Right.
A lot of people think the building code is the gold standard. Oh, I complied with the building code. Oh, so you met the minimum standard that is required for what is deemed necessary for general sanitation, health, safety, and welfare. That's what the building code is. And that's what I try to get across to people. Try to let them know that the building code is a coherent document. Many people think the building code is this assemblage of requirements, and one thing has nothing to do with the other thing, and the building code contradicts itself as you go through the book. In reality, it doesn't. And that's part of what we try and do in the preparation class. We spend a lot of time taking a deep dive into the building code, and we really explain to the students, here is how the building code is laid out. It's actually very logical. And when you look at the questions on the exam, or when the questions come up in real life, you can get through the building code and you can explain the building code using this criteria. And if you understand it, it's much simpler to be able to explain.
Right. And I think, building, first of all, I love the building code just in general is always so fascinating to me. And it's such a document that takes so much time to kind of review and understand and get through it. And so I'm always jealous of the building officials and inspector because they deal with the building code all day, every day. So you have this familiarity with, I guess, being involved in that industry. And what's interesting to me is, because right now your position, you're building official at St. Lucie County, correct?
That's correct.
Got it. And so you have to interface with the public. And I just kind of touch on that point again a little bit more. So, a homeowner will come in or a project owner will come in. And you're right. They seem to always, like, the building department is their point of contact for everything, whether it's building department or not. How is that interaction with you? Because you're so personable. And it seems like that would be, your personality really lends itself to solving problems. I mean, you're not so rigid, like you have such common sense approach to the code, and it's just about, let's get this problem solved. I mean, is that your approach for dealing with the public?
I appreciate that, Chris. Thank you. And yes, that's exactly what you have to do. As I explain it to people, the building department's role is to get the building built, put people to work, let them earn a living, and get that building on the tax roll. That's what the building department really does.
Right.
Now, if you don't go along with that philosophy, then you need to kind of rethink it, because that's really what our role is. And what we do is we start at the very beginning. You take a piece of property, an owner has a vision for what they want to do with that property. And as I explain it to owners right at the onset, let me digress for just a second to kind of go back to something else that you said. The main reason that people go to the building department and that people interface primarily with the building department is because the permitting process, if you think of it more like a bicycle tire, you've got the hub and you've got all these spokes that go out from the hub. When people submit a permit, or when they submit an application, they submit it through the building department. The building department is the hub, and the building department takes and gets that information out to planning, to zoning, to engineering, to water quality, to environmental, or the health department, or landscaping, whatever the various departments might be. Typically, they don't have their own submission process. Everything is submitted through the building department. So the building department becomes the main point of contact based upon the process. And the process has kind of led us to that. So when we deal with someone right at the very beginning, I try to explain to the owner that there are various processes. And the main thing that people need to understand is that planning and zoning, while it's not a building department process, is very crucial to them getting their initial approval. Right. The building code is permissive. And the building code, you tell me what you want to do, I can generally find a way for you to do it. It may be costly.
Right.
If you wanted to put a fireworks factory next to a child daycare, it may be costly with the separation that you're going to have to put between them, but I can usually find a way for it to happen. Not 100%,
right,
but the majority of the time. Whereas with zoning is neighborhood specific. And a lot of people don't understand that. Zoning says you can have residential in this area and you can't have industrial there. Or if you've got an industrial area, you can put up a 12-foot high fence with barbed wire on the top of it. But we're not going to let you do that on a residential project.
Right.
So zoning is restrictive, whereas the building code is permissive. And it's important for people to understand that right at the get-go, so that they begin to get with their design professionals. And when their design professional, who, by the way, is responsible for code compliance, by
Right.
Florida statute.
Right.
Florida statute actually says that the architect, the engineer, and the contractor are responsible for code compliance, which is kind of interesting that they left the inspectors, the plan reviewers, and the building officials out of that requirement.
Right.
But under our licensure, under Florida statute 468 part 12, we are responsible to ensure code compliance. So it doesn't have to be in Florida statute 553. It's covered under the licensure statute in 468 part 12. And that's the way we start the process. You're very correct in that we work very closely with the general public. And you have to remember sometimes the general public is going to be frustrated with the process. It's not that they're frustrated with you. They can get frustrated with the process. Or if you're dealing with a contractor that maybe has never done that type of construction before, and you're going out looking at the construction doesn't comply with the code, and you can't understand why the contractor just doesn't get it.
Right.
They don't have the same experience you have. So you have to take some time and you have to explain some things to them. I'm not telling you to hold an 8-hour class on the job site, but you need to explain to them about the various sections of the code. And that is why a plan reviewer or an inspector is required to cite the code section, which is why an inspector and a plans examiner really needs to understand the code.
Right.
I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. And it brought up absolutely. And it brought up a good point, or kind of when I was in my general contractor days, I learned so much from the inspectors that came on the job. I mean, I did mostly Miami-Dade County, city of Miami, and, and then occasionally I would do Broward County or maybe Monroe County. But the one thing they all had in common, I had a really good experience with the inspectors and the building officials. In Coral Gables was another one that they were great, and they would educate you on, okay, this is what's wrong, maybe with the design, or if you're on the job site, this is what's wrong with the installation. Let's figure something out, a solution to make this work. I always found them to be very educational. I mean, yes, sometimes it's frustrating. You want this job to keep going. Right? Nobody wants a failed inspection. But I always understood why they were doing what they were doing. But in your days back in the field, for either as general contractor, you have that story of the inspector kind of saying you should do this. But even as a field inspector, I mean, did you find that there's a lot of general contractors or subcontractors that they needed that education just because there's really not a prerequisite in Florida for them to have any formal training? I mean, they might have to have experience, but there's nothing formalized. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm very happy to see in many of the school systems, we're getting back to some vocational training.
Right.
And the apprenticeship programs are so crucial to us for increasing the knowledge and professionalism within our industry. I believe that every contractor should be supporting an apprenticeship and getting their people into an apprenticeship program. And if you don't have one in your area, get with your builders association, get with your school board, get with someone. There's got to be an association that you can talk to about getting an apprenticeship program going. The main thing about apprenticeship programs is that they need the support of the contractors.
Right.
And as a contractor, I think it's very important for contractors to understand they are responsible. If they are the license holder, they are responsible for the work that's being done on that project.
Right.
And unless you are there hands-on supervising, you have got to have people that are knowledgeable and that you trust. Otherwise, when the inspector comes out and you can't figure out why you can't pass the inspection, my question to the contractor is, have you been on this job? And if the inspector said, or excuse me, if the contractor says no, generally my next comment is, you really need to visit this job.
Right.
And then we'll have a conversation.
Right.
Because the inspector oftentimes is protecting the contractor's license. That's why inspections get turned down, is if it doesn't comply with the code. And especially if something bad happens, the contractor is the first one that a complaint's going to be filed against. The contractor is the first one that everyone is going to ask, how did you let this happen?
Right. Right. That's such a good perspective that there is a relationship. And I know that, we at Gold Coast, we offer a lot of exam prep for Division I, Division II contractors. So we try to instill very early in them that, you have to have an understanding of the code. Like you have 2 exams that cover code book, contract administration, project management for Division I. Division II, they have each individual code book. You're going to get questions, out of a plumbing code book, out of the mechanical book. You're going to get questions, related to roofing, out of Florida building code building. So there's a lot of code related knowledge that they need to, not memorize so much as be able to search, find, if they have questions, be able to navigate the code books. So that's interesting perspective. That the building officials and the building inspectors are also going to be contributing to that education. And the other thing that's so fascinating about your career, and you've always been a mentor of mine, for all things in this industry, and you have such a breadth of knowledge. What is for new, let's say, building safety professionals, who might be contractors or might be looking for additional licensure? Say that's my dog Bandit. He loves to say hello to you. What is your advice to them in terms of how to get started in the industry? How to what information do they need to have? What do they need to know? Maybe we can talk a little bit about, someone new considering this profession. What advice would you give them, and what would be sort of the starting point for them?
Excellent question, Chris. Study hard.
Got it.
Study a lot. Take as many courses as you can in order to gain understanding. One of the things that I tell people all the time is, the state of Florida, once you become a contractor, requires you to get continuing education. If you are a CILB contractor, you have to get 14 hours every 2 years. Of that 14 hours, you have a certain number of hours that are actually mandated to specific topics, because the state wants to make sure that you understand good business practices, that you understand what's happening in the world of safety and other topics as well. But people really need to understand is that 14 hours merely scratches the surface of what you need to know. Whatever section of the industry you are involved in, get involved in the associations that represent you. If you're plumbing, gas, mechanical, FAPGAM, the Florida Association of Plumbing, Gas, and Mechanical Inspectors. I know it says inspectors in the title, but where do you think inspectors get trained?
Right.
You need to be a part of the association. You need to be in the same class as the inspectors are in. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard from contractors, and I try to be involved in contractor organizations as well as inspector organizations. And you get into some of the contractor organizations, and what you hear is, look out, everybody. The inspectors just got a training class. Everybody's getting turned down on this.
Right.
Well, why weren't you there? Why didn't you learn about that? It's important, and we all have to share the knowledge. Many times becoming an inspector or wanting to get into this, most contractors or most superintendents or most employees in the construction industry truly do not understand everything that an inspector needs to know. As a contractor, you usually find a niche.
Right.
Maybe you're doing tilt wall and you've done tilt wall for 5 to 7 years. You qualify to be an inspector and a plans examiner. That doesn't mean that when you get your inspector's license, that you're going to be sent out to inspect tilt wall.
Right.
You may be going out to a post-tension job. And have you ever seen it? Have you ever been involved with it? I tell inspectors all the time, when you get onto a project you have never seen before, and believe me, folks, nobody knows it all. One of my favorite things to ask a contractor when I see a different way of doing things, or I see different products that I may not be familiar with, is I will ask the contractor, why'd you do it this way?
Right.
Most contractors want to explain to you what they did and how they did it. And it makes them feel good. Both of you get to learn something by doing that.
Yeah, and it is a learning. Like if you go into any profession, I think with your mind closed, that you have everything, you have everything already up here and you know it all, like you're missing out on a lot of.
You're doomed to fail.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, so kind of in that spirit of, I'm looking for a new profession. I'm considering inspector, plans examiner, or some other route within, let's say, building safety, but specifically for kind of what we prepare our students for is we have the building inspector program, and we have the principles and practice exam prep. We have the exam prep for the technical IBC exam and also for the plans examiner exam. So, but it can be kind of confusing and a little bit overwhelming and kind of where do I start and what do I need? Can you kind of start from the beginning? What a person needs to do in terms of application, in terms of exams to, let's just say, become a commercial building inspector and plans reviewer.
Very good. Yeah, the thing that you need to understand is that there are certain requirements, as you've just explained. When you go to the website, myfloridalicense.com, and it's one that shows up in the Gold Coast materials. We have the material that's on there. We've provided it for the students. We've tried to help the students to guide them through some of the process. First thing you have to understand is that it's going to take a little while to get through the application. There are two different ways to approach the application. And one of the ways to approach the application is to go ahead and get on the website, get the application. By the way, if you're going to apply for inspector, apply for plans examiner at the same time, folks.
Right.
And the reason I say that is when you read the requirement in the statute says to be an inspector or plans examiner. Here is the experience here are the requirements that you need to have. So the requirements for both of the positions are exactly the same. You will find on the technical exams, the exams through ICC, a huge part of the questions are the same questions. Sometimes they're worded differently. And the reason for that is that an inspector is out on the job site and actually looking at something. A plans examiner is typically looking at something two-dimensional on a screen. So you have to think just a little bit differently as an inspector versus a plans examiner. But the question is the same. Right. I can ask you the requirement for the width of a corridor 5 different ways. And you may tell me, oh, those are different questions. No, they're all asking the same question. What is the minimum width of a corridor? Well, if that's all they ask, then I've got to go with 44 inches, which is my standard width of a corridor.
Right.
If there's a stipulation, when a column is in the way or involved blocking the way, or however they may word it, of a corridor, the width of a corridor may be reduced to blank for blank inches. Well, at that point in time, now I'm looking into exceptions and I'm looking into the information that says that my corridor can be reduced to 36 inches for not more than 24 inches. And there's a couple different ways I can ask that question. As an inspector, I may ask the question, you are walking through a building, performing a framing inspection, and as you get to a drywall framing around a column, the width of a corridor is reduced to blank for not more than blank inches. As a plans examiner, I'm going to ask the question. The standard width of a corridor is blank. However, for a distance of not more than 24 inches, the corridor may be reduced to blank. That's the same question.
Right.
It's just worded differently for an inspector versus a plans examiner. So the exams are very much the same. The experience requirement is the same. And this is where many people make the mistake. When you file that application, you have to show to the board 4 years of experience as a minimum. It's important to understand what the board considers as 4 years, and that 4 years does not have to be 4 years right in a row.
Got it.
It can be broken up. The board allows for that. What the board considers 1 year of experience is 40 hours per week times 50 weeks per year, allowing for 2 weeks of vacation. 40 times 50 is 2,000 hours. In order to get 4 years, you need to show the board 8,000 hours of experience. Here's the kicker: in that category. So folks that are going for mechanical or plumbing, this is the easiest explanation I can give you. If you worked for an air conditioning and plumbing company, and you put down on there that you installed water heaters and you installed air handlers and you did duct work and you also did hex piping in a residential application, and you've got 4.5 years of experience, you don't qualify for either license.
Got it.
You don't qualify for mechanical or for plumbing because you didn't show the board 4 years of experience doing mechanical work or 4 years of experience doing plumbing work. And oftentimes what you need to do is you need to prepare a spreadsheet whereby you actually take and you put down what you did with which company during what period of time, and either how many months or how many years that represented. And then you total it at the bottom so that you can show, here is my mechanical experience. And I have 5.5 years doing mechanical based on everything that I told you about with these various employers. And within that, you can show your plumbing experience. And your plumbing experience may be 4 years and 3 months. Congratulations, you qualify for both plumbing and mechanical. But you have to understand, as an applicant, it is your job to show the board that you qualify for that license.
Right.
The board tries to give out licenses. If you've been to a board meeting, you have seen this, where the board will literally bring people up to the table. Yes, you need to be at the meeting when your
Right.
application is being heard. I can't overstress that.
Correct.
Because
Show
if
up.
there's
Yes.
a question. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say show up. Absolutely.
Yeah. If there is any type of a question that the board has, they're going to ask you to come up to the table and they'll ask you the question. They are permitted to accept testimony as part of allowing a license to be given out. So if you can answer their questions, you will generally be given an approval to obtain the license. That's when the next set of work begins. You have to take and pass 2 exams. Or in the case of applying for inspector and plans examiner, 3 exams.
Got it.
You have the principles and practice, which is a Florida-based test. And folks, Gold Coast's 2-day session on the principles and practice, after you take that 2-day session, there is no reason why you should not pass that exam. That exam is a straight up 50-question exam, evenly weighted. Every question is worth 2 points. and you have to get 70 points out of 100 in order to pass that exam. We will prepare you for that exam, and our passing rate on the exam, I have to say, is above 90%. If you pay attention, you attend the class, and you're not on your phone texting during class, and you're doing the highlighting, and you're listening and being involved in the conversation, you are going to pass that exam. The other two exams are directly through ICC. They are the technical exams. And there's two ways to take those exams. If you are proficient, I recommend to everyone, you should actually take the technical exam before you submit your application. If you take the exam directly through ICC and you get that pass certificate from ICC and you include it with your application, folks, your credibility skyrockets in the eyes of the board, because they can see that you already understand the code book. You already know how to look up things that are going to come up in the field and respond to contractors or respond to architects with the sections of the code book that apply to what they're working on and what they're asking you about. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to take the exam through the state of Florida, which means that you take and you file your application, you get to the board meeting, the board discusses your application, they may ask you about it. The best thing that can happen to you at the board meeting is that you've taken the time, you've gone to the board meeting, you've probably spent the night before in a hotel, you show up at the board meeting, and then 15 or 20 minutes into the board meeting, they will say, okay, these are the applications that have already been approved. And you hear your name. Don't have to go up to the table. You can leave. Right. You've been at the board meeting for less than an hour and you are approved by the board. Now you look at it and you go, well, this was a wasted trip. I didn't have to be here. No, it wasn't. That was one of the most valuable trips you could have made, because if there were questions, you had to be there. The fact that they're saying your application's been approved, take that as a thank you from the board for providing them the information they needed to approve your application. So it's a really good thing. So if you do that, then you get approved. In about a month, you'll get two letters or three letters from the board that'll say, congratulations, you've been approved to take the application. Here are your authorizations. At that point in time, you can get with Pearson VUE, and this is a lot of information, folks. We explain this in the class. We go into more depth in the class. I don't want to belabor the point here, but I want you to understand what the process is. So you can then schedule your principles and practice exam with Pearson VUE, and you can schedule your technical exam with ICC. Please understand, folks, this is not an overnight process. This takes time. Start to finish. If you go through the state of Florida for all of your exams, you need to understand and realize you are going to invest close to 1 year in order to get through the exams and obtain those licenses. One of the things that you can do, especially if you are looking to get hired on as an inspector or a plans examiner somewhere with one of the companies or one of the municipalities, there's another form, and it's called the provisional plans examiner and inspector. The form number is actually BCAIB 3, and I recommend that you fill out that form. We'll explain the provisional license in the class to you, explain what that does, but the executive summary here, right. The provisional license is a stopgap measure. that actually gives you a temporary license to go out and be an inspector or be a plans examiner or to be both of them during that period of time that you are taking the exams and getting the information back to the state that says, I've successfully passed the 3 exams that I need to be a plans examiner and inspector in this category. So that's what a provisional license is. As I said, we'll explain that more in the class. So, please, if you haven't gotten signed up for the class, goldcoastschools.com, go to the construction link and look at the building or the inspector and plans examiner hot link that's on the page and get involved, be a part of it, be a part of the class, be involved in the industry. You're going to have to in order to stay current on all of the things that are happening. So with that, I'll stop there, Chris. We could go on and talk more about it, but that gets everybody started and we cover more of that in the class.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the questions that always comes up, and it's one that I had because I kind of went through the program. I took principals practice. I had to do the application, I had to go to the board meeting, get the approval, which was great. I got approved. I was one of the names they called, so I was out of there pretty quick. I wish I had stayed, actually. It's very entertaining having stayed at a more recent one. It was very entertaining.
Oh, yeah. It's fascinating to actually sit through the application meeting and you listen to some of the people that get up to the table.
Yeah.
And you understand why it's important for you to be clear on your application.
Yes. Well, and that's part of it too, is so, the experience requirement, and definitely we go into that in the class, but for the application process itself. So the reason for the application process is you have to get approval. So if you go straight to ICC for the technical exams, you don't need any sort of pre-approval if you go straight through ICC for the building inspector, plans examiner. But to take principals practice, you need to get that approval before Pearson's going to issue a candidate ID or professional testing.
That's correct. The principals in practice requires board approval.
Got it.
Unlike many of the exams, that is the only exam that I'm aware of where you actually have to have your application approved before you can be authorized to take that exam. Now, let me just mention one other thing here that I forgot to bring out. The principals in practice exam, you only have to pass it once.
Right.
Once you pass it, you can add other endorsements onto your license that you can qualify for, or do internships or do cross training. You can add other endorsements for other categories without having to take principles in practice again.
Got it. So it's sort of the gatekeeper. Once you kind of get that one, you're able to add commercial inspector, residential inspector, plumbing, whatever you have experience in to qualify for the license. You could add that endorsement.
Correct. Or if you don't have the field experience, there are other options. There's a program called the cross training, whereby you actually ride with an inspector who holds that standard certification. They train you and you go to some classes. Okay, it's kind of like an apprenticeship where you are with a licensed inspector and then you take the theory classes so that you gain the understanding of that additional trade. And then when you pass the exam, then you can actually get that license. There's also an internship, which we can talk more about during the class. Got it.
Okay, that's super interesting. I think that's sort of the biggest question students come in. They kind of want to know. Another question that comes up a lot is, how many books do I need? What books are we going to need for each particular exam? Can you kind of go into that and what they can expect as far as their book load, and then your process for navigating the books during these exam prep classes?
Happily. For the principles in practice, let's start with that one. This is all laws and rules. The rules are the Florida Administrative Code. And if you are not familiar with these, Gold Coast has put together a phenomenal set of books for the principles in practice exam. We have the statutes and the rules grouped together. So you go through the particular statute, the rule associated with that statute is right behind it. And we explain the difference between the statutes and the rules in the class. There is a difference in them, and you need to understand that in order to know which one you're going to in order to be able to answer the question. So
Right.
we help you understand the difference between a question that's related to the statute and a question that's related to the rule. So we put that together. There are 3 books that you have for those. They are a ring-bound book so that when you open them up, they lay
Yep.
flat and you don't have the pages trying to close like
Yep.
you do with the soft-bound book. And we have that. And you need 2 additional books. So there are a total of 5 books you need for the principles in practice. You need the 3 volumes, A, B, and C of the statutes and rules. Then you need the Florida Accessibility Code and the Florida Energy Conservation Code. Those are 2 of the most important books that are in the building code family.
Right.
A lot of people don't have a lot of experience with the accessibility code and the energy code. As an inspector or plans examiner, you are going to be in and out of those books, no matter what trade you're going for.
Right.
Building, electrical, mechanical, or plumbing. A lot of people think, oh, accessibility, that applies to the plumbing inspector. No, it applies
Right.
to everyone. And everyone is going to be tested on the same questions out of the accessibility book. So we do an overview of the accessibility because accessibility is actually covered in 2 places. It's covered in Florida statute. It's part 2, I'm sorry, of Florida Statute 553. And then it's also those statutory requirements are moved into the Florida accessibility book, which has the statutory requirements and it has the federal requirements under ANSI A 117.1, which is the federal accessibility for ADA.
Right. Right.
And we cover that for the principles in practice. So it's 5 books for the principles in practice. On the technical exam, there are 3 books that are recommended by the International Code Council. And that is the International Building Code. Depending upon when you put your application in and when you do your testing and how you do your testing. Right now, and we're recording this in May of 2023. At this moment, the state of Florida is testing everyone on the 2015 International Building Code, which you may say, oh, that's outdated. That's not applicable anymore. You're right. But that's the book that the current edition of the Florida Building Code is based on.
Right.
And Florida is the only state in the country that still has the ability to test on the 2015. That's not going to last much longer. Florida is actually jumping over the 2018 International Code and going to the 2021 International Code. We get the 8th edition Florida Building Code on December 31st of 2023. That code is based on the 2021 International Building Code. Florida will be moving to the 2021 International Building Code sometime in the fall or spring, the fall of 2023, the spring of 2024. To the best of my knowledge, they haven't announced it yet when they're going to change the testing with ICC. So be aware that we are going to be making a change. If you are looking to do this right now, it's important that you get your application into the state, that you get involved in the classes, that you do your studying based on the 2015 International Code. Or if you're one of those folks who says, I'm not going to wait for the state of Florida. I'm going to go ahead and take the technical exam when I'm ready. I've been working in Texas or Illinois or somewhere that's already using the 2021 International Building Code, and you are familiar with the 2021 International Building Code. Take the exam direct through ICC and take it based on the code you're familiar with. Take it on the 2021. It's the same certificate that you get, folks. The certificate does not say which edition of the code you got it under. It's going to say commercial building inspector, commercial plans examiner, and it'll have whether it's building, electrical, mechanical, or plumbing. That's what it'll say on it. Commercial plumbing plans examiner. It's the same certificate. So that part of it can be confusing. We try and explain that again in more detail or answer your specific questions in the class. If you're not registered for the class, get registered, get involved. Gold Coast does something that many other places don't. They allow you to access the in-classroom materials and the online materials for a year. So get involved, be a part of it. Get the training, come to our classes. Let us help you understand the code book and help you get around in the code book. Nobody should even try to memorize the code book.
Right.
It is far too in-depth, far too complex. You need to know how to get around in the code book. And once you do, whether it's under the 2015, the 2021, the 2024 International Code, and there are changes that take place, but you'll still know where to go in order to get those answers. So on the technical exam, you need the International Building Code. You need the concrete manual. Which edition? You got to go to the ICC website and you have to go to the exam page and look at the reference materials on the exam page. And it will tell you which edition of the concrete manual you need. Now, ICC within the last year has made a change, and they have highly recommended that you have the ACI 318 book. I'm going to be right out front with you. I hate talking about books. And Chris, I mean no disrespect, because I know that Gold Coast spends a lot of time, and our staff spends months putting those laws and rules books together.
Yeah.
And I mean no disrespect when I say I hate talking about books, because they are just expensive.
Yes.
But the books are expensive. And the ACI 318, I believe, is like $254.
Yeah. And going up every minute. Yes.
There are a couple of questions that come out of the ACI 318 that you can't answer out of any other book. Do you need it? Yes, you should have it. Are you going to fail the exam without it? I seriously doubt it. Most of what's in there is covered in the concrete manual, and many of the questions that you would be asked that are covered by ACI 318, if you've been working with reinforcing steel, if you've been working with concrete, if you have done slabs, you've done elevated slabs, you've done columns, and you've done tie beams, you know about the lap, you know about welding of steel, you know about concrete cover. Do you have to have ACI 318? I'm going to say no. Should you have ACI 318? Absolutely.
Right.
So
Right.
Those are the three books that you need for the technical exam. You really need two of them, folks. The building code and the concrete manual. ACI 318, you should have. And that covers the books, Chris.
Got it. Yeah, it's always so, a lot of students who want to come in, they look at, okay, we got to take the live classes. We need to get the book package and make sure that we have our books when we're in class. I think that's something very critical. You have, because you are in the books in that class. And then you teach. So I know we have some, basically the full year option is very unique to Gold Coast. I think it's such a benefit for the students who enroll with us, because you get access to all the live classes, you get access to the Zoom links, so you can watch live stream from home or from the office or from another quiet space. And you also have access to a series of on-demand video libraries, so you can go back and watch classes, pause, rewind, fast forward. So all of those things are all kind of lumped together and included. But the live classes, I know that you had, we had done some classes on a Thursday, Fridays, and then we have some weekend options. Kind of go over the different options students have for live classes, and then we can kind of wrap it up in a nice bow for them.
Terrific. Yeah, we have tried to provide the students with what they want and what they need. In many cases, especially if you are working for a municipality, that municipality will support you in obtaining your licenses. It's in their best interest to support you. A lot of people don't like the weekend classes. So if you are with a municipality, and in some cases, when you're with the municipality, if you do something on the weekends, the municipality has to pay you overtime for it. In other cases, the municipality says, hey, the license is your responsibility. So we have tried to do both of those. We're offering Thursday, Friday classes for the people that can attend them directly from their office. And then we offer the weekend classes for the people who have to work all week. Or maybe you're doing this on your own and your employer doesn't even know that you're trying to become an inspector or a plans examiner. We offer the weekend classes. You can come to the Thursday, Friday, and the Saturday, Sunday classes.
Right. You can do it all.
Yeah, it's all available to you as a Gold Coast student. So we've tried to give everybody what they want and what they need. And that's the way we think. You know, we try and do what the students want. We get feedback from the students. We've modified the classes. We've modified the times on the classes. We've modified the presentation of the classes based on what the students have given us feedback on. And I think at this point in time, we've got some of the absolute best instructors, not talking about myself necessarily, okay? But
it's true. It's so true.
I do have a pretty good passing percentage on the exams.
Yes.
A lot of people have asked me why I don't get onto the board, onto the Building Code Administrators and Inspectors Board, or as we lovingly call it, BCAB. Well, if I did that, I couldn't teach these classes anymore.
Right. Yes. So we can't have that. No more. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I want to be able to pass it on. I think that's a big part of what we do. One of the opportunities I've had that I didn't mention before, I actually taught apprenticeship for 25 years. And I believe in apprenticeship. I believe in passing the knowledge on. And I believe in helping make the next set of folks coming up through the industry better than us. That's what we believe at Gold Coast. And that's what we want to pass on. So any suggestions that you have as a student, don't hesitate to give them to us because we want to hear from you. These are your classes. We already have our licenses. We're not doing this for us. We're doing this for you.
Well, that's amazing. What a great way to wrap it up. Doug, you've always been a great mentor for me. I appreciate you. It just is always a joy to sit in your classes and to listen to the wisdom. So students, if you're on the fence, you gotta be in a Doug Harvey class. Just it's worth the price of admission. So Doug, thank you so much for your time. As always, and again, thank you for being with Gold Coast and being such a loyal instructor for us. And you're very much appreciated. Really appreciate you.
Pleasure to be here, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Well, thank you guys. If you have any questions about enrollment, any questions about the exam prep programs at Gold Coast Schools, you can go to www.goldcoastschools.com. You can give us a call. We have an amazing student support team at 1-800-732-9140. Or you can email me at contractor@goldcoastschools.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. We also have a weekly, a monthly open house, which you're welcome to jump on if you have any questions, additional questions about the programs. And as a student, you also have access to our weekly orientations for new students, as well as our office hours on Wednesdays. So there's a lot of additional features that go along with not just the tuition and access to the live classes. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Doug, once again, and everyone have a great day. We'll see you on the next episode.